Operation Economic Fury: How the U.S. is hunting Iran's shadow fleet across the world. The war didn't stay in the Gulf. 400 miles east of Sri Lanka, deep in the Bay of Bengal, thousands of miles from the Strait of Hormuz, a U.S. Navy helicopter drops onto the deck of an oil tanker. Armed troops rappel down. They board the ship. They search it. And they find what they came for: 2 million barrels of Iranian crude oil headed for China. The Pentagon released the footage. They called the tanker stateless, even though it was flying the flag of Botswana. And they made something very clear: international waters are no longer safe for sanctioned cargo. In the same week, a U.S. destroyer disabled a 900-foot Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. U.S. forces boarded another vessel off the coast of India, and American military leadership issued a warning: Iranian-linked ships will be pursued anywhere in the world. This is no longer a blockade. It is a global supply network takedown. To understand what's happening, you need to understand the system Iran built to survive sanctions. It's called the Shadow Fleet. Hundreds of vessels, oil tankers, cargo ships, intermediaries, operating under constantly changing identities. They switch flags, turn off tracking systems, transfer cargo between ships in open water, move through ports in Malaysia, Oman, and the UAE, and eventually deliver oil to buyers, primarily in China. The system is designed to hide origin, ownership, and destination. For years, it worked. Iran kept selling oil. China kept buying it, and enforcement efforts struggled to keep up. Then, everything changed. On April 13th, the United States imposed a naval blockade on Iran. But more importantly, it expanded its reach. The U.S. declared it would pursue Iranian-linked ships not just in the Gulf, but across the Indian Ocean and into the Pacific. And within days, it acted. The turning point came with the seizure of a vessel known as the Tosca. The ship was nearly 900 feet long, Iranian-flagged, recently in Chinese ports, heading toward Iran. When it approached U.S. forces, it was warned for hours to turn back. It didn't. So the U.S. Navy fired into its engine room, disabled it, boarded it, and took control. That moment changed everything. It showed that enforcement was no longer symbolic. It was physical, direct, and global. Analysts believe the ship may have been carrying something critical, possibly dual-use materials. Its route, its persistence, and its refusal to comply all suggest it was not an ordinary shipment. And it raised a bigger concern: China, because many of these ships are tied, directly or indirectly, to Chinese ports, buyers, and supply chains. That concern became clearer days later. U.S. forces boarded a tanker in the Bay of Bengal, far from the Middle East, carrying nearly 2 million barrels of Iranian crude. The ship had visited Chinese ports repeatedly. The cargo was believed to be heading there. No shots were fired, the boarding was clean, but the message was unmistakable: distance no longer protects you. The United States also issued a new maritime directive. It declared that any vessel carrying goods deemed useful to Iran's war effort could be boarded and seized, regardless of location. That phrase, regardless of location, is critical. It means a ship in the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, or beyond could be stopped if suspected of carrying Iranian-linked cargo. Legal experts say this is one of the broadest assertions of maritime authority in decades. At the same time, operations expanded geographically. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command began intercepting ships that had left Iran before the blockade even began, effectively applying enforcement retroactively. Within days, multiple vessels were boarded or redirected. Others were escorted under naval supervision. The goal is clear: disrupt the entire network. Not just the source, but the routes, the intermediaries, and the delivery points. But Iran has responded. Within days of the first major seizure, Iranian forces detained commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Foreign crews were held, vessels were anchored under Iranian control. This is escalation, not through missiles, but through shipping. And it puts the global maritime industry in a difficult position, because now every ship entering these waters faces risk from both sides. On one side, U.S. interdiction. On the other, Iranian retaliation. And in the middle, civilian crews with no role in the conflict. Step back and look at what this campaign targets. Iran's shadow fleet is not just a workaround, it is a financial lifeline. It moves millions of barrels of oil, generates billions in revenue, funds military operations, supports regional allies. Disrupting it is not just economic pressure, it is strategic pressure. China plays a central role. It buys the majority of Iran's oil exports, often through indirect channels, often through shadow fleet operations. Sanctions have targeted Chinese entities, but the flow has continued. Now the U.S. is targeting the transport itself, and that brings the two largest economies in the world closer to friction. So far, China has responded cautiously. It has rejected accusations, criticized sanctions, but avoided direct confrontation. That balance may not hold indefinitely. Meanwhile, Iran faces another challenge: storage capacity. If oil cannot be exported, it must be stored, and reports suggest Iran's main export terminal is approaching its limits. Once full, production must slow or stop. That creates deeper economic damage. So the pressure is building from multiple directions. But the outcome is not guaranteed, because the shadow fleet is adapting. Ships are changing routes, avoiding patrol zones, using new methods to disguise movement. And despite interceptions, many vessels are still getting through. There are also legal uncertainties. Some seizures involve ships flagged under other countries. Questions remain about whether those actions comply with international law. Disagreements are growing between governments, legal bodies, and maritime organizations. And then there is the biggest unknown. What happens if a U.S. operation intersects directly with Chinese state interests? So far, that line has not been crossed, but each interception moves closer to it, and the consequences of that scenario are difficult to predict. So here is where things stand. The United States is conducting a global maritime campaign against Iran's oil network. Ships are being tracked, intercepted, boarded, and seized across vast distances. Iran is responding with its own actions, targeting commercial shipping and holding vessels as leverage. The shadow fleet is under pressure, but still functioning. China remains involved, but cautious, and the global shipping system is caught in between. This is not just about oil. It is about control of supply chains, enforcement of economic power, and the reach of military force in international waters. The war may have started in the Gulf, but it is now playing out across oceans, and every new boarding, every seizure, every intercepted shipment adds another layer of risk. Because all it takes is one miscalculation, one incident that goes too far, to turn this from an economic campaign into something much larger. The shadow network was built to stay hidden. Now it is being hunted in plain sight, and the world is watching what happens next.